Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for a link to my Amazon store where I've compiled some of the very best items available, including some of my own personal recommendations. Thanks! What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a really cool knife overview slash review to share with you guys. This is the Custom Knife Factory and Philippe Georget, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, FIF20 or FIF20. Very interesting knife. It is, of course, based on a custom knife, the FIF20 by Philippe Georget, but it's made by Custom Knife Factory, and they are a production company that's based in Russia that works with some really cool custom knife makers. They are probably most famous for the Decepticon, the Resenti Snafu that they made here recently, which is also going to be coming to the channel. And then this guy, absolutely. And then there's the FIF23, which is the larger one. This is actually the shorter one. And I was instantly drawn to this knife. I'm sure you guys could guess, as many of you probably are, by the aesthetic here. This is absolutely 100% one of the most aesthetically pleasing knives that I have ever seen. And I think that is what drew a lot of people in. There's a lot going on here, and it's just really cool. So I'm gonna let you guys know right off the bat, when CKF does a knife, they're pretty much always in limited production runs, right? So they're numbered. They are expensive. The idea is to bring some custom knives to the table at more reasonable prices. But this is still, when it was available, was still a very expensive knife. I think originally you could pick them up at like from Russia with knives and some other places maybe. They came in at about $580, nowhere near the price of the true custom, which I think was somewhere around $1,200 to $1,300, depending on the options. But yeah, so secondary market is going to determine what these guys are worth, and I'm going to guess they probably go for more than that. So just keep that in mind. This is going to be a review, but those were the numbers there if you were wondering. This knife was sent to me by, his name actually down in the comment section is just M, and I've gotten used to seeing him comment. I appreciate your comments, M. I appreciate your participation in my live streams. It's always fun. You can follow him at Mike, I'm not sure how to say your last name, MIKECOUCOULES. I double checked that, so you can follow him. Please give him a follow. It's because of people like him that I'm able to bring you guys daily knife content, and this type of content specifically. It's also because of my generous patrons. Thanks so much for supporting me during this time. If you'd like to get your hands on some of these cool stickers and some other benefits, there is, of course, a link down to my Patreon in the description. Your support would absolutely mean the world to me. Let's go ahead and measure this guy. So like I said, this is the smaller one. And it's funny because this is still a full-size knife, absolutely. Coming in at right at 8 inches. Blade length coming in right at 3.5 inches. Cutting edge coming in at about 3.4 inches overall. Just crispy good. Right there in the sweet spot. I think I've never handled the bigger one, but I love big knives. You know, they're fun. Like, oh, cool. It's really, big. But man, if I was going to carry this, yeah, this makes way more sense to me, especially considering it's still a big knife. Now, the blade length is still over the legal mark for a lot of people, so use your best judgment there. Yeah, it's really great size. Let's do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. So you can see there, it's definitely shorter than the Rat, but it's still a full-size knife. Same blade height, roughly. And cutting edge is actually about the same. Maybe a little longer on the FIF20 or FIF20, however you want me to say that. Up against the Spyderco PM2. Spyderco PM2 is coming in at 8.3 inches overall, a little bit longer than the FIF20. How about up against the Benchmade Reptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at exactly the same length, about 8 inches overall. There's some similarities there. This looks like, some future and some steroids kind of made this a little, maybe some, it's kind of like, to me, it's the difference between Squidward and Handsome Squidward. Yeah, that's kind of what's going on there. And then last but not least, the Spyderco Para 3. Spyderco Para 3 is coming in at 7.25 inches overall. So how is the action on this guy? Ladies and gentlemen, the action on this guy is absolutely, completely, and totally ridiculous. I was getting it over that mark. So you have to remember there, you're seeing this straight down. We're actually slightly at an angle here, but this is not only fall shut, it is totally frictionless. The other thing, this knife actually inspired me to do a top 5 front flippers of all time, because after handling this knife, I realized, I was like, man, the front flipper and the top flipper thing, it's fairly new in terms of all the different, ways that we open or deploy our knives here within the last few decades. So it is an unorthodox means of deploying your knife, and everybody kind of has to adjust to it. And even if you're somebody that, regularly operates these, it is still a little bit different, and it's a little bit of an unnatural feeling for a folding knife. But this knife does it so well. And it's easily one of the best front flippers that I have ever experienced. First try, on camera, you saw me unbox this, and I just, took what I knew about how to engage a front flipper, and it just does it every single time. It's a really wonderful feeling, and it's so easy to disengage and have just drop down here. Now, I will point this out. It's a little bit pointy right here, so sometimes as you come around, you're breaking away from this corner and kind of slamming into that corner. I wish that corner was a little bit more knocked down, but that's a pretty minor nitpick. I guess you could call that a hot spot. You don't actually engage with that part of the knife when you're using it, so it's really on deployment. The people it's going to bother are the people like me who sit around on their couch and flip these things over and over and over again. It's a pretty mild annoyance, though. It's just something that's there, and I wish it wasn't. I mean, the aesthetic lines are great. You can see there that cutout actually displays the maker's logo. Or is that CKF's logo? No, that's the maker's logo. Maybe that's CKF's logo. Sorry. It displays that, and that's fine. I think that aesthetically is a nice way to do that. But unfortunately, that sharp little corner right there, I'll let you guys look at it. It's just a little bit pokey to come down on. The rest of the knife, though, I mean, just absolutely great in that department. But yeah, this is absolutely one of the top 5 greatest front flippers that I have ever experienced. And the combination of the glassy smooth, frictionless fall shut action and the solid lockup, it's so pleasant. It's just so wonderful. This knife deploys and feels exactly like it looks with no shortcomings, even from somebody that's really nitpicky like me. Really, really happy with that. I would do the hardware check on this guy, but I'm not going to touch this thing with my tools. I'm just not going to, because it's an expensive knife and now it's a rare knife, and I just don't want to slip. We've got zirconium bolsters here that would definitely show if I marked it up with my stupid tools, and I'm not going to risk that. So you guys I might get an eye roll from that, but sorry, I'm going to respect the person who sent this to me. It looks like we're probably looking at a T8 to T10 pivot. And then, unfortunately, it looks like maybe, yeah, T6, almost definitely on the overlays here. Now, underneath, I'm not sure what's holding it all together. T6, whatever it is, T6 is annoying, if you are going to take it apart, because it might strip the screw, it might strip the head of your tool. Yes, even if it's a WIA or a nice tool, right? Just use caution. It's not the end of the world, and it's certainly not a deal breaker. If you're going to take this apart, just make sure you've got a steady hand. Don't apply too much torque in any direction, right? The same stuff. Just be careful. So that's fine. It looks like it's probably, of course, the 2 heads on either side. You've got the 2 screws for the overlays, and then probably a couple of screws underneath holding the frame together. So, I mean, fairly minimal hardware. It's nothing crazy, and they're not using anything proprietary, so that's great. I don't have a problem with any of that. How about carry profile up against in terms of thickness, up against the Spyderco Para 3? It is a little thicker. It's got fairly thick titanium liners, and then some pretty thick zirconium bolsters and shred carbon fiber scales on top. But not anything insane. I mean, the overall profile of this thing is still going to make it fairly easy to carry. In terms of profile, in terms of height, up against the Spyderco Para 3 and PM2, 2 knives with unquestionably awkward carry profiles that nobody ever complains about. You can see there that it's about the same length in terms of handle as the Spyderco Para 3, maybe a little longer. It's definitely shorter than the PM2, and in terms of height this way, it's definitely shorter than both of them. So despite the fact that it is thicker, it's still going to come in and out of the pocket pretty easily. It's like I always say, if you wear athletic shorts every day, skinny jeans, leather pants, right, anything really tight, it's not going to be your cup of tea, especially if you're used to carrying things that are really, really lightweight. But for most people, if you're just wearing regular jeans, regular khakis, right, you're used to carrying larger knives, knives between the 4 and the 6 ounce mark, it's not going to be a big deal. This guy's coming in at 4.59 ounces. The combination of titanium and zirconium, which is actually, a heavier material, and then the carbon fiber is not the heavier part, but yeah, it's coming in at a reasonable weight. It is over that ounce and inch mark, but this is right where my preference lies, between 4 and 6.5 ounces. The combination of the really good carry profile and the smooth surfaces make this really easy to carry, in my opinion. Just kind of, obviously just cater that to, your own preferences there. All right, did we get through all that? Let's move on to the part that I'm really excited about, the aesthetics. So I really like a bolstered look. I really like the combination of bronze or almost gold hardware up against darker gunmetal materials like zirconium and, of course, the darker shades of carbon fiber, and they have nailed this. We have a reflective bronzed anodized titanium pivoter, as far as I assume, shred carbon fiber, we have zirconium bolsters, and then we have this subdued bronze titanium liner and a bronze titanium pocket clip. To me, they could not have done the aesthetics and the colors of this better. I would not change a single thing about the color combinations and the shape of things. I mean, other than that little corner right there. No, the rest of this is absolutely wonderful. Sorry about that. I'm in the basement, so we get to hear all of the pipes and everything while I'm doing a review. But anyways, yeah, this is just wonderful. Zirconium is, and this is me getting this information from an old Jim Skelton video. It used to be that there were a lot of makers who were reluctant to work with zirconium, and it's because it throws a lot of sparks. Zirconium is apparently pretty dangerous to shape in a shop. As they're grinding it, you know, there's a chance that the sparks can catch something and I guess catch it on fire. I don't know. As far as, you know, durability as a bolster, yeah, it's a great material. It doesn't make a good material to you know, turn into the actual titanium frame lock because it is fairly soft, and I guess it'll warp more, it'll wear away easier than like titanium. But in terms of like durability as a bolster, I think it's great. And the benefit, obviously, in this case, is aesthetics. You know, I've seen polished zirconium, I've seen matte zirconium. I think the matte actually works better here by contrast. I think if it were polished, it would look a little funny and you'd get a lot of fingerprints on it. You know, so I think this looks really great. Unfortunately, with shred carbon fiber, the nature is that when it, you know, you have a line here between the scale and the bolster. As far as like the flushness, yeah, it feels pretty good. Sometimes with shred, there are little gaps and things like that, and I think that's just the nature of shred carbon fiber. So it's not fitted absolutely perfectly on either side, and that's it's a mild aesthetic annoyance. I see stuff like that and I'm like, I wish it was lined up perfectly. But I think the nature of shred carbon fiber, you know, or marbled carbon fiber, is that sometimes they're like, with marbled, it's pretty natural to see voids here and there, and with shred, it's normal to see some variation in the fitment up against something else. That's just based on what I've seen. Maybe I'm trying to justify it because I really like how this knife looks. I don't know, and that'd be a subconscious justification. But yeah, just to be honest with you guys, there is a little bit of a gap here, and I think I've heard that before. But in a, you know, it's going to bother some people in terms of how much money they had to pay for this. You don't like to see stuff like that. But in terms of utility, if you're actually going to use it, tiny little pieces of debris might get stuck in there periodically, and then you got to just pull them out. But it's close enough. It shouldn't bother you. And, you know, this is like, on my review table, I've got the lighting set up to bring the most definition that I can possibly bring so you guys can see it. But looking at it in natural light and my light, it honestly looks pretty good. So it's an eye of the beholder thing. It depends on how you view it. It's kind of a frustrating visual flaw, but it's not a deal breaker in my opinion. And it may not be the case on all of them. Love how shred carbon fiber looks. All these edges up here are a little bit angular. It's not so sharp that it actually creates discomfort in use, though. I find that, you know, wrapping my hands around this, despite the edges being a little bit angular, I really don't notice it. And I think it's because of the heavy chamfering, right, and the amount of material here that's filling out the hand. If this was a much thinner knife, maybe squeezing it might yield a more uncomfortable experience. But that's the conclusion that I'm coming to, is why I'm not feeling those edges as much. Truthfully, no. I mean, everything is not, it's easy to hang on to. If I was going to use this knife really hard, I'd be using gloves anyway. But for regular EDC, pulling it out a few times a day, making cuts with it, whatever, even a few continuous cuts, if you're going to break down cardboard with this knife, I think you're going to be fairly comfortable with your, you know, bare hands. There's a little bit of jimping right here. I kind of would have liked to see it extend a little bit further, but it's not a big deal that it's right there. Aesthetically, oh my goodness, this is almost a completely flat ground blade. And I watched Nick's video on this, and he said he wasn't 100% sure if it was flat or hollow ground. I'm really not 100% sure either. I can tell you that it absolutely comes down to a ridiculously thin edge, and it is so good. So 99% of the time, I always say, I'm so tired of satin finished blades. I like tumbled blades. In this case, this is one of the only times I've ever said this. In this case, I actually prefer the hand rub satin finish that's on this guy, because they did it so perfectly. Look how good that looks. No line is out of place. Every line goes straight down the blade, and it is so uniform and beautiful. The contrast here, dark, subdued, almost menacing, right? But fancy. It's a menacing, fancy gentleman who is also, you know, a special ops. That's what it makes me think of down here. And then it's just absolutely beautiful. And there's this, the transition between here and here is just wonderful. I love the cutout that shows the logo right there and the placement of the designer's logo on the back, which I assume that is actually. Am I wrong? No, CKF is on the back and the Philippe Georget logo is on the front. I'm stupid. I'm sorry, guys. Anyways, yeah, the blade is wonderful. And the blade stock thickness, which we can measure, and that's why people always come down and they're like, get that tape off of your calipers. It's on there to protect some of these blades, guys. I don't want to scratch this stuff up. And as long as it's zeroed out, that extra material is not going to change the accurate measurement. 137 thousandths, it's probably 135 thousandths accurately, or the actual, you know, if you go check the stats on the maker's page. So yeah, it's not ultra thick to begin with, but it does carry reasonable durability down to the tip. A nice little swedge right there. The actual cutting edge is completely and totally uniform on both sides. And like I said, it's a laser beam. That is one performance-oriented blade. It will cut what you try to cut with it, unless you are trying to cut concrete, in which case it won't. But normal materials that you would try to cut, yeah. You can see that it is number 169. Like I said, this is a numbered blade, so unfortunately not available all the time, or at all right now. M390, which I think is perfectly emphasized in this geometry. M390 is not a tough steel. This isn't a geometry that emphasizes blade strength. M390 is going to resist corrosion almost completely and has excellent edge retention when heat treated properly. I don't know if this is heat treated properly, but I haven't heard anything about this not being heat treated properly, so I'm going to assume that it is. And in this case, this geometry is really, really well emphasized, or vice versa, by M390. I think this is just perfect. I know M390 is like the most popular thing, and it's almost ironically becoming boring because we see it on everything, but M390 makes sense in certain geometries and it doesn't in other geometries, right? You wouldn't want a hatchet made out of M390. To me, I want something that is, you know, that I'm gonna cut consistently with, and something that's gonna readily pass through material. And that's what this is to me. It's a tool that I would use for a lot of cutting. And for a long period of time, you know, it's going to pass through material easily. There's nothing in the cutting path. So when you present that blade with the material, right, it's going to pass through that material, and that's nice. That's what I want. I love the cutout here. There's plenty of room to engage that. That's exactly how that should be done, right? Plenty of room there to get in there, even as that bar wears over a little bit over time, which it's not going to do readily because there is a steel lock bar insert. It's very easy to engage. It's very comfortable. The blade comes down and contacts your finger, so there's a nice place to get it to stop. Obviously, when you do that, make sure that your finger's not back here because it will definitely get you. Just make sure it's up against, you know, the little sharpening choil area right there, which is done correctly, and you'll be just fine. This area here nicely allows you to lock in with these two fingers. Now, I wear an XL glove, so if your hands are slightly smaller than mine, you're going to be fine. If they're bigger, you might have a little bit of trouble. I know, like, my dad's got, you know, his hands look like my hands with gloves on. His fingers are that thick. And if you work outside with your hands a lot for a long period of time, right, there's a lot of you watching who probably have hands like that. My hands are not delicate, and I've got calluses, but there are definitely people out there who have much larger hands, in which case you might be a little bit more cramped in here, but this fits me very, very comfortably, and I really enjoy that. There's a lot of freedom on the handle. You don't feel super confined. Even if your hands are a little bit larger, it's nice to be able to move around. Love the contrast between the materials here, the subdued titanium liners, and then the zirconium backspacer, and that is what that is. That is zirconium. Really nice. There is a stop pin back here. There's no shouldering. It's not that big of a deal because there's a steel lock bar insert, so wear over time is going to be nice and slow. Pocket clip is just wonderfully simple. Sometimes, you know, with a certain design, the pocket clip can just ruin it for me. When they've got a certain aesthetic flow, and I'm like, oh, that's so beautiful, and then I flip it over to the other side, and there's this freaking, you know, like, it just looks like abstract art. Like somebody tried to top it off with this weird, like, you know, putting their own unique spin on the pocket clip and trying to make that the centerpiece. The pocket clip should simply just flow with the design and be functional. You know, I don't need a big crazy thing, you know, a big animated character or something on it. I don't need that. I mean, if it works with the design, then great. But a lot of times pocket clips just freaking ruin it for me. And in this case, they just nailed it. That pocket clip is so simple, but it is definitely, you know, plenty durable. It's definitely got the retention, right? Even these areas here, they look sharper than they actually are. They're not. This is just a great pocket clip. It's going to readily slide over your pants. There's a nice little fuller in here that doesn't serve any purpose other than just looking nice. There's 2 screws in there holding it nicely in place, so no play. And it's going to carry not ultra deep, but that's all the more that's going to carry out or stick out of your pocket, so that's just fine. This knife is absolutely perfectly centered. There is no variation. It's not slipping over to one side, and it absolutely locks up 100% solid. No blade play up, down, left, or right. I'm apprehensive about touching that blade because it just looks so beautiful. This is really cool. Every last little element of this is just wonderful, and I very much enjoy this knife. Again, little nitpicks. There's some T6 screws on it. The fitment between the shred carbon fiber scale and the zirconium bolster is not absolutely perfect, but we're not talking about, it's not raised in certain areas. It's not like, I mean, transitioning from here and here, you're just maybe ever so slightly feeling that really minuscule gap, but there's not like one scale is not taller or thicker than the other. Right up here, we're not seeing like excess thickness. I mean, this is all still the same. It's flush for the most part, completely flush, so that's fine. There's a little bit of pokiness right here that's going to bother you if you flip it over and over and over again, but that's pretty much it. There is a little bit of an adaptation process with a front flipper, but this one is very, very welcoming. It is so welcoming to the hand, and yeah, you know, that's really nice. This has a special fidget factor about it. Now, you are still at more of a risk of dropping this thing than a regular knife because you do have to kind of hold it in a way that's not 100% secure. I can see some people dropping this, which would be, oh, that'd be a real kick to the groin, right? Considering that this is expensive and basically unavailable. So just prepare yourself for that. Make sure there's carpet under your feet while you practice, right? But it's plenty durable, so if you do drop it and you plan to use it, oh well, it's going to add some character to it, right? This is an expensive knife, but what goes into it and the materials used, this is what I would classify as a semi-custom or mid-tech. A lot of people would say, that's a production knife. You know, Custom Knife Factory is a production company, but everything that comes out of Custom Knife Factory has human element to it. There is handwork that goes into that hand rub satin finish. There's a lot of hand checking, hand tuning, hand assembling. There's a lot of excess handwork that goes into this. And it wouldn't surprise me if the blades are hand ground or at least hand sharpened. That stuff does cost extra money. If you don't see value in those things, that's fine. And you don't have to, I mean, obviously nobody's forcing you to pick this knife up, but do those things cost more money by default? Yes. Yes, they absolutely do. I don't know if this knife in its entirety is manufactured or made in Russia. I'm going to guess that the hand elements are probably done in Russia. If there are some parts of, you know, maybe there's some stuff here that's outsourced to China. I don't know. But I mean, is what's in this knife, you know, fair in terms of a $580 price tag when it was available? Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, yeah. You know, and remember, guys, I regularly handle knives that are worth between $20,000 and $3,000, and I've handled a lot of stuff. I've got well over 1,000 uploads on the channel, so that's where this is coming from. But you certainly don't have to take my opinion as law. It's just opinion. The problem here is that it's not available, so that's a downside. You know, I'll tell you this: if you can get your hands on it for a reasonable price around that $580 mark, honestly, I mean, if it were me and somebody offered this to me for $500, I'd say, heck yeah, hand it over, right up to the $580 mark. I start seeing this for $600, $650, $700, something like that on the secondary market, probably going to shy away from it because you just don't know what kind of condition it's in until you get your hands on it. I wish that they would continuously produce these, but I honestly don't know if that's what they plan to do. So I can't openly recommend this to people, but yeah, if you can get your hands on this for the $580 mark or less, can I recommend it to you? Oh, yes, definitely. So this knife isn't going to be going on my most recommended knives playlist just for that reason, but rest assured it is very, very well made. Obviously a functional tool, a beautiful design, and for those reasons it's going to go on my favorite knives of all time playlist. It has definitely earned a spot there. Thank you so much, M, or once again, here's his Instagram, for sending this guy along. Really appreciate it. That's going to be pretty much it for today's review, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that metal complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.